It's funny how life has a way of turning your dreams into something you never saw coming. For months, I had been planning this family vacation, something I thought would bring us all closer together after years of being caught up in our separate lives. I'm Alex Turner, and I'm not exactly someone who would normally splurge on a grand trip. But something about this year felt different. Maybe it was because I was nearing retirement. Or perhaps it was the passing of my wife, Sarah, a few years back, that left me searching for some sense of connection. In any case, I decided to treat my family to a trip they'd never forget, a week-long vacation to Banff, Alberta. It was a place I had always dreamed of visiting, and I wanted to share it with my son, Ethan, and his family. I wanted to create memories that would outlast the busy years ahead. And I figured, what better way than to fund an unforgettable trip? I pored over the details for weeks, booking the flights, finding a cozy lodge with views of the Canadian Rockies, and even arranging excursions like hiking, fishing, and, of course, some much-needed relaxation. I wanted everyone to enjoy themselves, the grandkids especially. I could already picture them laughing as we walked by turquoise lakes, their faces lit up by the warmth of the sun and the love that only family can bring. It felt right. It felt like the beginning of something meaningful. For months, the family had been planning along with me, contributing ideas for activities and places to visit. Ethan was particularly excited. He kept texting me about all the details, reassuring me that everything would be taken care of. "Don't worry, Dad, I've got it covered," he would say. And with those words, I felt the weight of my responsibility lift off my shoulders. But, of course, life has a way of throwing curveballs. It was the day of departure when I first sensed something was wrong. The excitement of packing and checking the last-minute details had filled the air that morning, but the day quickly descended into something I wasn't prepared for. It all started at the airport. We had arrived at Toronto Pearson Airport a bit earlier than usual. I pulled my suitcase behind me, feeling a mixture of anticipation and the familiar tinge of nervousness I always had before a trip. Ethan, my son, was there. But something about him seemed off. He was pacing back and forth, scrolling through his phone with an air of impatience. I approached him with my usual cheer, asking, "Are you all set?" "Ethan," he looked up briefly, gave me a half smile, and nodded. "Yeah, just a minute," he replied, still distracted. I couldn't shake the uneasy feeling that had settled in my stomach. We had planned this for months, and yet he seemed oddly detached from it all. Was it just me? Or was something off? We made our way to the check-in counter where I handed over my passport and ID. As I watched the woman behind the counter process the family's tickets, I felt a jolt of realization. I hadn't been given a ticket. I hadn't even been told about the flight details. Something was wrong. My heart sank as I finally asked, "What about mine? Is my ticket ready?" The woman looked at me with a polite smile. "I'm sorry. See you. But there's no ticket under your name." My world tilted on its axis. It was as if the earth itself had suddenly forgotten to spin. "Excuse me," I repeated, trying to steady my voice. "There must be some mistake. I've paid for this entire trip." She glanced at the computer again, her fingers flying over the keyboard. "I'm afraid I don't see any reservation for you." "Sire." Perhaps there's been some confusion. My mind was racing, each thought colliding with the next. I turned to Ethan, hoping for some explanation. But instead of reassurance, I was met with a cold silence. Ethan's face was turned away from me, his gaze fixed on the departure board. It was then that I saw it, the truth. The thing I had been avoiding seeing for so long. He hadn't booked my ticket. He hadn't even bothered to include me. "You forgot," I whispered, the words escaping my lips before I could stop them. Ethan didn't even look at me. He just shrugged, his face impassive. "Dad, we need to talk. Let's go." He didn't sound like a son concerned about his father. He sounded like someone trying to push me out of the way, like I was a burden he no longer wanted to carry. My knees felt weak, and the world around me seemed to blur as I struggled to grasp the situation. For a moment, I stood there, paralyzed. How could he have done this to me? How could he have planned a family vacation without bothering to include his own father? I had spent years raising him, supporting him, and now he was discarding me like I didn't matter. "Ethan," I tried again, but the words stuck in my throat. "What are you talking about? This is our family vacation. You're not leaving me behind. Just go home." "Dad, it's fine," he said, his voice flat and devoid of emotion. "We'll figure it out. We've got this." He walked away before I could respond, disappearing into the crowd like it was all already over. I stood there for a moment, my hands trembling as I tried to process what had just happened. My son had just told me to go home, as if I was some inconvenience that didn't belong in their perfect picture of family happiness. I felt as though the ground beneath me had been ripped away. The weight of betrayal pressed on my chest, suffocating me. I had spent doazech, 000 money I had worked for. Money that was supposed to bring us together, and now it felt like I had just been abandoned at the edge of a cliff. I was supposed to be part of this. This was supposed to be our trip, our time to make memories, to bond. But it had all been a lie. Ethan had already made his decision weeks ago. I wasn't invited. I wasn't needed. I was just a financial contributor. Nothing more. But as I stood there, a spark of clarity began to form in my mind. I couldn't just let this go. I wasn't going to walk away from this. Not without answers. Not without making sure that Ethan knew the consequences of what he had done. I may have been standing alone in the airport terminal, my suitcase beside me, like a symbol of my isolation, but I was far from finished. "Excuse me," I said to the airline agent behind the counter, my voice shaking but firm. "Please, can you check again? Is there any way I can get on a flight today?" Her face softened as she typed something into the system, but the answer she gave was the same. "I'm sorry, sir. We're fully booked. There's nothing available." The words hit me like a blow to the gut. There was no way to undo what had been done. I had been shut out, left behind. It was a harsh reality, but it was mine now. I walked away from the counter, my legs feeling heavy with each step. The truth was undeniable. I had been cut out of my own family's life. And the worst part was, it wasn't even a mistake. This was intentional. But I wasn't ready to accept this. Not yet. I still had a say in how this would play out. They had underestimated me. They thought I would just walk away quietly, as if I didn't matter. But I would show them that I still had strength, that I still had a voice. And so, as I turned my back on the departure gates, I began to formulate a plan. The trip was over for me. But this wasn't the end of the story. Not by a long shot. I walked through the terminal, my footsteps echoing with the feeling of emptiness that had settled in my chest. It wasn't just about the vacation anymore. It wasn't even about the money, though $20, 000, wasn't a small amount by any means. No, it was about something deeper. Something that I had never expected to feel from my own flesh and blood betrayal. I had spent months planning this trip, believing that I was doing something good for the family. I wanted to bring everyone together, to give them a chance to escape their busy lives, to create memories that would last But now, here I was, standing in an airport alone, with my family gone without me, left behind, discarded, as if I was nothing more than an afterthought in their plans. As I moved away from the check-in counter, my suitcase dragging behind me, I couldn't shake the thoughts running through my mind. Why would Ethan do this? Why would he betray me this way? I had given him everything. I had supported him through thick and thin. From his college years when he was struggling with his grades, to his first apartment, his wedding, and every milestone in between. I was always there. But now I was just an inconvenience. Someone to be left behind the moment it suited him. But as my feet carried me further from the counter, a new resolve began to grow inside me. I wasn't going to let this slide. I wasn't going to let him or anyone think they could treat me like this without consequences. I had raised Ethan, and I had given him everything. I didn't deserve to be treated like this. I wasn't just going to walk away. I was going to make sure they understood the gravity of their actions. And that's when I decided to take matters into my own hands. I pulled out my phone, and I quickly dialed a number. I hadn't thought I would need to call in a long time my lawyer, Rachel Williams. I knew that she had handled a few family issues for me in the past. But this felt different. I wasn't calling her for a minor dispute or a legal contract. I was calling her to ensure that this betrayal would not go unnoticed. "Rachel," I said as she picked up, her voice calm and familiar on the other end. "I need your help. Something's happened, and I need to take some legal action." As I explained the situation, the shock in her voice was evident. She couldn't believe it either. But Rachel was a professional. She didn't get caught up in the emotions. She focused on the facts. And the facts were clear. Ethan had crossed a line. "Alex, I'll help you. We'll make sure this doesn't go unpunished," Rachel said, her tone firm. "We need to start by reviewing your will and making sure your wishes are protected." I paused for a moment, letting the weight of her words settle in. I didn't want to think about disinheriting my son. But at that moment, I knew it was the only way to send a message. It wasn't just about money. It was about respect. And Ethan, unfortunately, had lost my respect. Before I hung up, Rachel said one last thing. "Alex, I know this is hard, but you need to remember that actions have consequences. You're not doing this out of anger. You're doing it to protect yourself and your legacy." And that was when I realized she was right. I wasn't doing this out of some vengeful desire. No, I was doing this because I had to. I had to protect my peace, my dignity, and my future. As I left the airport, I felt like I was walking into an entirely different life. The family I thought I knew was now gone. The vacation I had hoped would bring us together had become the catalyst for a massive shift. I wasn't sure what the future would hold. But one thing was certain. I was done being treated like a fool. I know. This has been a lot to take in. And trust me, I get it, this story is more than just about a trip gone wrong. It's about family, trust, betrayal, and the ultimate fight for self-respect. If you're finding yourself reflecting on your own relationships, trust me, you're not alone. Now, before we go any further, I need to ask you to do something for me. If you're enjoying this story, please hit that like button, subscribe to the channel, and share your thoughts in the comments below. Have you ever been in a situation where someone you trusted completely turned their back on you? How did you handle it? I'd love to hear your thoughts, so make sure to share them with us. And don't forget to hit subscribe, because there's much more to this story, and I don't want you to miss a single moment. As the days passed, I found myself sinking deeper into a quiet determination. I couldn't just let Ethan get away with what he had done. The next step was clear. I needed to rework my will. and I needed to do it quickly. I spent the next few hours poring over my documents. I had always been the meticulous type. Everything had to be in order, especially when it came to my finances. But now, those same documents would serve a different purpose. They would be my protection, my defense against a family that had shown me nothing but disregard. I remember sitting at my desk, going through the papers one by one. The realization hit me hard. Everything I had worked for, everything I had given, had been taken for granted. My son, my flesh and blood, had been the one to rip the fabric of our family apart. But as I read through the papers, I knew what I had to do. It wasn't easy. It wasn't something I wanted to do. But I had to make it clear that actions had consequences. Ethan couldn't just walk all over me because he thought I was too old to fight back. He was about to learn a very harsh lesson. I wasn't the fool he thought I was. I called Rachel again, this time to finalize the changes to my will. She walked me through every step, ensuring that my intentions were clear and legally sound. I still remember the moment when I signed the new will. The finality of it, the weight of my decision, settled over me like a heavy cloak. This wasn't just a change in the documents. This was me taking back control over my life. No longer would I be the one on the outside looking in. I was done being ignored. I had spent too many years being the generous, giving father, the one who was always there. But now, it was time for Ethan to realize that respect had to be earned, not demanded. As I sealed the envelope containing the new will, I felt a strange sense of peace. It wasn't anger that motivated me anymore. It wasn't frustration or hurt. It was something much clearer: justice. And that's when I knew that no matter what happened next, I was ready. I had taken the steps to ensure that my family's betrayal would not go unchallenged, but the road ahead was still uncertain. I had no idea how Ethan would react, or if he would ever come to understand the magnitude of his actions. I also didn't know how my other family members, his wife, Lena, or even my grandchildren would handle the fallout. But in that moment, I didn't care. I had taken back my dignity, and that was enough for me. The next few days felt like a strange blur. The decisions I had made weren't just legal steps, they were personal boundaries that I had drawn for the first time in a long while. After years of being the one to give, the one to support, and the one to sacrifice, I finally stood firm in my resolve. I had spent a lot of time asking myself if I was doing the right thing, but deep down, I knew there was no going back. It was done. Ethan had crossed a line, and now he would face the consequences. The silence in my house was deafening. I had always thought the loneliness would hit me harder after Sarah's passing, but somehow, this new isolation felt more complete. It was a strange thing, realizing that the emptiness didn't come from the absence of my wife, but from the absence of my son's respect and loyalty. This was different. This was betrayal. I spent the days following that phone call with Rachel in a daze, processing everything that had happened and trying to come to terms with the fact that my family had turned into strangers. It wasn't just Ethan. It was the entire family dynamic I had worked so hard to maintain. How had we come to this? Was I that invisible to them? Was I really just an ATM? A source of money to fund their vacations and support their lives? Had I been that blind for so long? I sat in my study, staring out of the window at the quiet street. The sun was setting over the houses in my neighborhood, casting long shadows across the manicured lawns. It was a typical scene. Everything was calm. Everything was as it should be. But nothing felt the same anymore. My mind kept replaying the moment at the airport when Ethan had coldly told me to go home. "You go home, Dad. We'll handle this ourselves." Those words echoed in my head as I sat there, the pen still resting in my hand. It had been a few days since I had finalized the changes to my will with Rachel. I had taken all the steps necessary to protect my legacy. But that didn't mean I was ready for what was coming next. I wasn't sure if Ethan would ever speak to me again, or if he would come crawling back after realizing the gravity of his actions. And yet, there was still a part of me that wondered whether he was capable of understanding at all. Maybe, just maybe, he was too far gone. As I stared at the will on my desk, sealed and ready to be executed, I thought about the last few months. Had I been wrong? Should I have let Ethan handle things his way? Should I have been more patient, more understanding? But then I remembered the look on his face at the airport, the indifference, the relief. It was then that I realized he had already made his choice. I picked up the phone again. Rachel's number popped up on my screen, and I hesitated for a moment before pressing call. "Rachel," I said when she picked up. "I need to talk to you about something." "What's going on?" "Alex." Her voice was warm, but I could tell she was ready for anything. Rachel had been a good friend over the years, not just a lawyer. She knew me, knew my family, and understood the weight of these decisions. "I've been thinking about it. I began, and I'm wondering if I did the right thing. You know, with the will, I'm not second-guessing myself. Well, I just can't stop thinking about Ethan and what's going to happen next." She was quiet for a moment, letting me finish. "Alex, you did what you had to do. Don't let guilt cloud your judgment now. You gave him everything, and he chose to disrespect you. This is on him, not you." I nodded to myself. She was right. "I know." "Rachel," I said, feeling the weight of her words. "But you know how it is." I raised him. I thought I knew him, and now I'm not even sure if I ever really did. Sometimes. "Alex, the people we love can hurt us the most, but you can't change that. What you can do is protect yourself, and if that means making sure he doesn't get a dime from you, then that's what you do." "I know," I replied quietly, running a hand through my hair. "I just don't know how I'll face him when he finally comes around. And I know he will. He always does when he wants something. But this time, it's different. Let me ask you something," Rachel said, her tone turning more serious. "What do you want to happen now?" "I don't know," I admitted. "I just want things to go back to the way they were. Before all of this. Before the betrayal. But deep down, I know that can't happen. The damage is done, and I'm the one who has to live with it." "Exactly," Rachel said. "And you're doing the right thing. You're not doing this out of spite. You're doing this because you need to protect yourself. You need to be able to look yourself in the mirror. I just hope he learns something from all of this," I said quietly. "But I doubt it. I think he's too far gone." We were both silent for a moment. I could feel the weight of the conversation settling over me like a heavy blanket. This was it. There was no going back. The family I had tried so hard to build had fractured beyond repair, and all I could do now was try to pick up the pieces of my own life. Pause. Before we go further, I have to take a moment to check in with you. I know this has been a roller coaster of emotions, and if you've ever felt betrayed by someone you loved, you'll understand exactly what Alex is going through. So here's what I want you to do if you're resonating with this story. Hit that like button and share your thoughts. In the comments, have you ever faced a betrayal like this? Or maybe you've been in a situation where you had to make a hard decision to protect yourself. Share your experiences. And, of course, subscribe to the channel because there's still so much more to come. Trust me, you won't want to miss the next chapter. The days dragged on, and as the weekend approached, I found myself growing more anxious about what would happen next. I knew that eventually, Ethan would try to reach out. He always did. But this time, it wasn't going to be the same. I wasn't going to be the one to apologize. I wasn't going to let him manipulate me like he always had. This time, things were different. I thought back to when he was a kid, when everything was simple, when he'd look up at me with those wide eyes, asking questions about the world, trusting me to have the answers. I had done everything for him. Everything. And yet, in one moment, everything changed. The next morning, my phone buzzed. I knew it was coming. It had to be him. It was a text from Ethan Dad. I know things have been crazy lately, but I think we need to talk. I stared at the message for a long moment, my fingers hovering over the screen. This was the moment I had been preparing for, but I didn't reply immediately. Instead, I put the phone down and walked outside. The morning air was crisp, a slight chill that I hadn't felt in months. It reminded me of the time before everything had gone wrong, before the weight of betrayal had shattered everything I had built. As I stood there, taking in the fresh air, I realized that it wasn't about Ethan anymore. It wasn't about the money or the vacation. It was about my own peace, my own dignity. And if Ethan couldn't understand that, then maybe he never would. I picked up my phone, typed out a reply, and hit send. I don't think there's anything left to talk about. I stared at the message for what felt like an eternity. I don't think there's anything left to talk about. It was short, to the point, and it was the hardest thing I had ever written. But deep down, I knew it was the only answer I could give Ethan. I wasn't just rejecting him. I was rejecting the way he had treated me for so long. I had spent decades being his father, guiding him, teaching him, always there when he needed me. And yet, in a single moment, he had tossed it all aside, as if everything we had built together didn't matter. It was a strange feeling, the kind of emptiness that settles into your bones and makes everything else seem far away. The life I had known for so long was now a distant memory, and the person I had trusted most, my own son, was now a stranger to me. I thought about everything I had done for him, the years of support, both emotionally and financially, the vacations, the holidays, the gifts. I had always been there, but not anymore. I placed my phone on the table and walked out onto the porch, the cool morning air biting against my skin. I had lived in this house for over 30 years, and in all that time, the view from my porch had never changed. The street was still the same. The trees were still tall, and the houses in the neighborhood stood like quiet sentinels. Everything outside seemed unchanged, but inside, everything was different. I had given so much to my family, and now I was alone. But I wasn't going to stay in that place. As much as I wanted to dwell in the sadness, I knew it wouldn't help me. Ethan had made his choice, and as painful as it was, I had to make mine. It was time to reclaim my life. I know this part of the story is hard to hear. It's a reminder that sometimes the people we love the most can hurt us in ways we never expected. But if you've been through something similar, I want you to know that you're not alone. Life is full of challenges, and the road to recovery isn't always easy. If you've ever been in a situation where you had to let go of someone you loved for your own peace of mind, please take a moment to like this video and share your experience in the comments. It helps to know you're not the only one fighting this battle. Don't forget to subscribe so you don't miss the next chapter, because the story is far from over. The following days felt like a blur. After sending that message, I expected Ethan to reach out again, to apologize, to try and fix things. But there was nothing, not a word. It was as if he had vanished into thin air. And in some strange way, I began to wonder if I had already become a ghost to him. I kept myself busy, burying myself in work and hobbies I had neglected over the years. I started revisiting old projects I had put aside, things I hadn't had the time or energy for, but no matter how much I tried to distract myself, my thoughts always returned to Ethan. What had gone wrong? How had we ended up here? I didn't want to think about it, but I had no choice. I knew I had done the right thing by standing up for myself, but that didn't mean it didn't hurt. There were moments when I found myself missing the way things used to be when Ethan was a child, when we were a family. But then I remembered how easily he had discarded me, how effortlessly he had ignored everything I had done for him. And that was when the anger crept in. I spent hours sitting in my study, the piles of papers on my desk untouched, while I fumed over everything. Ethan's selfishness, his indifference, the way he had manipulated me into thinking I was part of something I was never meant to be a part of. It wasn't just a vacation that had been stolen from me. It was my place in the family, my identity as a father, as a grandfather. That was what he had taken from me. I knew I had to take action. But I wasn't sure what that action would look like. I had already changed my will, already protected myself, legally. But there was more to it than that. There was the matter of Ethan's future. I spent another evening pacing the house, wondering what was next. Should I contact him again? Should I try to work things out? Or should I just let him come to me? As I knew he eventually would, I hated that I still cared. That a part of me still wanted to believe things could go back to the way they were. But I wasn't sure anymore. The phone rang one evening as I was sitting on the porch, watching the sun dip below the horizon. I picked it up, my heart sinking when I saw the caller ID. It was Ethan. I let it ring twice before I answered. The sound of my own voice, feeling foreign when I spoke. "Hello, Dad." Ethan's voice came through the line, distant and strained. "Can we talk?" I didn't respond right away. The silence stretched between us, thick with everything I wanted to say and everything I knew I couldn't. "Dad," He stopped mid-sentence, as if unsure of how to proceed. I don't know what happened. I don't know how things got so messed up." I closed my eyes for a moment, taking a deep breath. Was this really happening? Was he really trying to fix things? Or was this just another attempt to manipulate me, to get what he wanted? Without understanding the depth of the hurt he had caused. "You don't know what happened," I finally said, my voice colder than I intended. "Ethan, you made your choice. And now we're both dealing with the consequences of that choice. I know. Dad, and I'm sorry. I messed up. I should have handled everything differently. You were supposed to be with us. And his voice faltered. "I didn't mean to hurt you." I felt a lump rise in my throat, a mix of anger and sadness that I couldn't explain. "Ethan," I said, cutting him off. "I gave you everything. I trusted you, and you left me behind like I didn't matter. You can't just apologize and expect everything to go back to normal." There was a long pause on the other end. "I know," he said quietly, "but I don't know how to fix this." "Dad." "You don't," I replied, my heart aching at the words. "Because it's not about fixing things. It's about understanding what you did and living with it." Another silence. Then, his voice, small and unsure. "I was wrong. Dad, I see that now. I want to fix it. I don't think you can." "Ethan," I said, my voice firm, resolute. "But you can learn from this. You can learn that actions have consequences, and that sometimes you don't get to walk away from the people you've hurt." "Dad," he whispered. I'm sorry. I closed my eyes again, trying to steady my breathing. The words sounded empty, hollow, and I knew in that moment that nothing would ever be the same again. I know you are, I said quietly, but it's too late. In the days that followed that conversation, I felt a strange sense of calm. Ethan had reached out, but I wasn't sure what that meant for the future. His apology felt like an obligation, not a genuine act of remorse. And I knew, deep down, that the distance between us had grown too wide to bridge. But I was no longer that man, the one who would bend over backwards to make things right for everyone else. I had spent too many years doing that, losing pieces of myself along the way. Now, I was reclaiming what was mine. I wasn't sure what would happen next. Maybe Ethan would change. Maybe he wouldn't. But one thing was clear, I was done playing the fool. And no matter what came next, I knew I had taken control of my own future. The road ahead was uncertain, but at least I knew I was walking it on my own terms. And for the first time in a long time, that was enough. Days passed, and life seemed to continue as it always had. The world outside my door remained unchanged. The sun still set behind the hills of Toronto. The trees lining the streets swayed in the same rhythm, and the neighborhood remained as peaceful as ever. But inside my heart and mind, everything had shifted. Ethan's apology, no matter how sincere it seemed, couldn't undo what had been done. The damage was already done. After our conversation, I found myself spiraling into an unexpected silence. The relief I had hoped to feel after confronting the situation never came. Instead, it was replaced by something far deeper, an ache that seemed to consume me. I couldn't figure out what to do with the emotions that had been swirling inside me for weeks. Part of me wanted to just move on, to forgive and forget. But I knew better than that. This wasn't something I could just erase from my mind. For so long, I had prided myself on being the one who held everything together, the one who provided, who cared, who offered unwavering support. But now, as I sat in my favorite armchair, sipping my coffee, I realized that all of that had come at a cost. I had been paying the price for my generosity, for my willingness to sacrifice for my family, without ever asking anything in return. But now, I had nothing left to give. The silence was deafening. I spent hours at home, reflecting on everything that had led me here. What had gone wrong? What could I have done differently? I had tried to be the perfect father, the perfect grandfather. I had worked hard my entire life. But none of that seemed to matter to Ethan. He had made his choice, and now I had to live with the consequences. I picked up my phone once again. This time, the screen showed a message from Rachel. Alex, I wanted to check in with you. Have you thought more about the next steps? I know this is hard, but I want to make sure you're prepared for what comes next. I sat back in my chair, staring at her message. The next steps. What were the next steps? I had already changed my will. I had already distanced myself from Ethan emotionally. But that wasn't enough. What did I really want to happen next? Rachel had asked me that before. And at the time, I hadn't had an answer. But now, as I sat there alone, the answer came to me. It wasn't about getting Ethan back or forcing him to apologize. It was about taking back control of my life, of my future. I dialed her number. The phone rang twice before she answered. Alex, how are you doing? She asked. Her voice calm but tinged with concern. I'm okay, I replied, not entirely sure if that was true. I've been thinking about what you said. The next steps. Good. It's a tough situation. But you've got to protect yourself, Rachel said. her voice reassuring. I know it's hard, but you've already taken some huge steps. The will, the legal protections. You're not just standing up for yourself, you're standing up for the person you want to be going forward. I nodded to myself, though I knew she couldn't see me. I don't want to keep dwelling on this. I don't want to keep being stuck in this anger. But I'm not sure how to move forward. I don't know what the future holds. Rachel, that's understandable, she said. But remember this, you're not alone in this. You have control over your own destiny now, and you need to hold on to that. Ethan will have to live with the choices he made, just as you have to live with the consequences of your actions. And sometimes, that means walking away. Walking away, I repeated, tasting the words. It's just so hard to do that. To let go, especially when it's family. I know, Rachel said. But think about it this way. If you continue to hold on, if you keep allowing yourself to be manipulated by his actions, you're not helping him. You're not helping yourself either. The hardest thing you can do sometimes is to let go. Her words resonated with me more deeply than I expected. I had spent my entire life holding on to things, trying to keep everyone together, trying to be the pillar that everyone relied on. But now that it all crumbled, Ethan had torn that pillar down with his betrayal, and no amount of holding on was going to rebuild it. I think you're right, I said slowly. I've been holding on to something that isn't real anymore, and maybe it's time to let go. Rachel sighed, a sound of relief. You're doing the right thing, Alex. I know it's tough, but it's the only way you'll find peace. That night, as I lay in bed, I found myself reflecting on everything that had happened. Ethan's betrayal had been the catalyst for something I wasn't ready for, a deep, personal reckoning. I had always thought I was strong, that I could weather any storm. But now, I realized that strength wasn't about enduring hardship for the sake of others. It was about knowing when to walk away, when to stop sacrificing yourself for people who wouldn't do the same for you. I thought about the times I had spent working late, missing family dinners, ignoring the signs that my relationship with Ethan was changing. I had been so focused on being the provider, the dependable father, that I hadn't seen what was happening right in front of me. Ethan had been growing more distant, more independent, and I hadn't been paying attention. But that was over now. The life I had known, the role I had played, was done. And the hardest part wasn't just realizing that. It was realizing that Ethan would never truly understand the sacrifice I had made for him. I wasn't sure if he ever would, and that was okay. As much as I wanted to fix things, to make everything right again, I knew I couldn't. Not this time. This wasn't a simple mistake that could be corrected with an apology. This was something deeper, something that went beyond the surface. I reached over to my bedside table and picked up the envelope containing the final version of my will. This was my statement. This was my declaration that I had taken control, that I wasn't going to let myself be treated like this anymore. I had already made up my mind about Ethan. There was no going back now. But that didn't mean I had to carry the weight of his betrayal forever. The next morning, I woke up early and went for a walk in the park near my house. It was a ritual I had started after Sarah passed away. I would walk, I think, and process the events of the day. As I walked through the park, I couldn't help but feel a sense of clarity. This was the beginning of something new. I wasn't going to spend the rest of my life dwelling on the past. I wasn't going to let Ethan's mistakes define me. I was going to find my own path, one that didn't include him. And so, as I sat down on the bench by the lake, watching the ducks swim peacefully by, I realized that I had finally found the peace I had been searching for all along. It wasn't about fixing the broken pieces of my past. It was about accepting them, letting them go, and moving forward with my life. It had been several days since I had walked away from Ethan's last attempt to reach out. The silence that followed felt more like a burden than a relief. I had made my choice. I had let go. I had taken control of my life and my future, and yet the weight of that decision still hung heavy on my shoulders. As the days turned into weeks, the reality of my situation began to sink in. I was no longer part of the family I had known. There were no more phone calls. No more text messages. No more visits from the grandchildren. It was as if I had faded into the background of their lives, a ghost that no longer mattered. And while part of me ached for the relationship I had lost, another part of me felt a strange sense of peace. I had spent so many years trying to be the perfect father, the perfect provider, the perfect grandfather. I had given everything I had, not because I expected anything in return, but because I thought that was my role in the family. I thought that by giving, by sacrificing, I could earn the love and respect of those closest to me. But now, as I sat alone in my study, I realized that love and respect couldn't be bought. They had to be earned through genuine connection. And I had been overlooking that for years. That afternoon, as he sat at my desk, I couldn't help but reflect on everything that had led me here. Ethan's betrayal had been the catalyst for change. But it wasn't just about him. It was about me. I had spent decades living my life for others, never once considering what I needed or wanted. I had always been the one to give, the one to hold everything together. But in doing so, I had forgotten to hold myself together. I ran my fingers across the surface of the desk, staring at the pile of papers that had accumulated over the weeks. There were bills to pay, documents to sign, and plans to make, but none of it mattered anymore. I wasn't the man I used to be. That version of me, the one who lived for everyone else, was gone. And while that was a painful realization, it was also liberating. I picked up the phone and dialed Rachel's number. "Alex," she said when she picked up, her voice calm and reassuring. "How are you? I'm getting there," I said, my voice sounding more tired than I expected. "I've been thinking a lot about everything, about what I want out of the rest of my life." She paused for a moment before responding. "I think that's a good place to start. What do you want?" "Alex," it was a simple question, but it was one I had never asked myself before. I had spent my entire life making sure everyone else was happy, making sure everything was taken care of. But what did I want? What was left for me? Now that I had lost so much, I'm not sure yet, I admitted, but I know I need to figure it out. I need to do something for me. Something that's just mine. Rachel's voice softened. "It's a big step, Alex, but I think it's the right one. You've given so much of yourself to others. Now it's time to focus on what's next." I took a deep breath and nodded, even though she couldn't see me. "I think you're right." After the call, I sat in silence, contemplating her words. What did I want? It seemed so simple. But in reality, it was the hardest question I had ever faced. For so long, I had been living for others, fulfilling roles that had been expected of me. But now, I was free. I could create my own path. It was up to me to decide what that path would look like. Over the next few days, I began to reflect on the things I had put off for so long. My passion, my dreams, things that had always been there, tucked away in the corners of my mind, but had never been prioritized. I had always loved painting, but I had never made the time for it. I had always dreamed of traveling, but I had always put it off for the sake of work or family obligations. Now, I had the opportunity to do these things, to pursue the passions that had been sidelined for so many years. I took out my old sketch pad and began to draw. The lines were shaky at first, but the more I drew, the more I felt a sense of peace. It was as if the act of creating something from nothing gave me back a sense of control, a sense of purpose. For the first time in a long time, I was doing something for myself. In the evenings, I would take long walks through the neighborhood, letting my mind wander. The fresh air, the sound of birds chirping, the rustling of leaves, it was all so calming. I began to realize just how much I had missed out on by always focusing on others. There was a whole world out there, one I had neglected in my pursuit of perfection. One afternoon, as I walked by the park, I saw a group of children playing soccer. They were laughing, chasing the ball, and shouting with excitement. I stopped for a moment, watching them. It reminded me of when my own children were young, of the joy in their faces as they played and ran free. I couldn't help but smile. But at the same time, a pang of longing settled in my chest. I missed those days. I missed being a part of their lives in that way. But then something clicked. I wasn't going to sit around and mourn what I had lost. I was going to live in the present, and I was going to make the most of what I had. Pause. I know that this chapter is hitting hard. We've all been through moments of deep introspection, where we're forced to confront who we've become and what we want out of life. If you're going through something similar, if you've ever had to reinvent yourself after losing something or someone important, let me know in the comments below. Share your thoughts with me. And if you haven't already, don't forget to like, share, and subscribe. I'm so glad you're here, and there's more to come. It wasn't long after that I made the decision to take the first step toward reclaiming my life. I booked a trip, not for anyone else, not for my family, but for me. I had always wanted to see the northern lights, to experience the wonder of the Arctic. It was a dream I had held for years, but one I had never made the time for. I spent the next few weeks preparing. I researched the best time to visit, booked a small cabin in the wilderness, and made arrangements for the adventure. For the first time in years, I was doing something for myself, something that didn't involve anyone else's needs, expectations, or desires. And when the day finally came, I boarded the plane with a sense of excitement and anticipation that I hadn't felt in a long time. This was my time. As the plane took off, I looked out the window at the sprawling city below. The life I was leaving behind. It was a strange feeling, knowing that I was leaving everything I had known, everything I had spent so many years building, but I didn't feel sadness. I felt something else of freedom. The next few days were filled with breathtaking moments. The snow-covered landscapes of the Arctic, the towering mountains and vast expanses of frozen lakes, and then, one evening, the northern lights appeared in the sky. It was more beautiful than I had ever imagined, the colors swirling and dancing in the night sky. As I watched in awe, I felt a deep sense of peace. This was my new beginning, and I was ready for it. It's funny how, when you step away from everything, the world suddenly becomes clearer. The northern lights had been everything I expected, and more. They danced across the sky like a message from the universe itself, reminding me that there's more to life than what we hold on to, more than the pain, more than the betrayals, and more than the people who, despite everything we give, fail to see us for who we are. As I stood there, surrounded by the vast, empty beauty of the Arctic, I felt the weight of my decisions finally begin to lift. This trip was more than just an escape. It was a turning point. It was the moment I realized that I had spent far too long living for others, and now it was time to live for myself. The following days, spent in the solitude of the remote cabin, were a revelation. I spent hours alone, either hiking in the snow-covered hills or simply sitting by the fire, allowing my mind to wander. There was something calming about the stillness of it all, the silence, the space to think without distraction. I had never given myself permission to think this way, to truly stop and take stock of my life. I had always been moving, always planning, always doing for others. But now, for the first time, I wasn't just existing, I was living. I woke up early every morning to watch the sunrise over the snowy peaks. The air was crisp, the sky an expanse of pale blue. There was an overwhelming sense of peace in these moments, a reminder that the world continued on, regardless of the chaos that might be happening in my own life. The world was bigger than my problems, and that realization was both humbling and freeing. As the days passed, I began to wonder if I had been given a second chance, not just at life, but at understanding what truly mattered. The material things, the accomplishments, the work I had done all my life, it was important. Sure, but it wasn't everything. As my week in the Arctic came to a close, I started to feel a strange mix of emotions. I was ready to return to Toronto, to resume my life. But I was also reluctant to leave. The world I had created for myself during this time felt so different from the world I had left behind. It was as if I had been living in a fog for years, and this trip had been the moment it had finally lifted. The clarity, the peace, the sense of self, it was all there, and I wasn't sure if I was ready to let it go. But life, as it tends to do, had other plans. I boarded the flight back to Toronto with a renewed sense of purpose. The journey home felt different, as if I were returning from a trip not just across the world, but into a new chapter of my life. When I landed, I was met with the usual noise and rush of the airport. The cacophony of announcements, the clatter of luggage, the tired faces of travelers eager to get home, it all felt so different. But it wasn't just the noise that stood out. It was the way I moved through it. For the first time in years, I wasn't caught up in the whirlwind. I wasn't just another passenger on the ride of life. I was the one in control now. As I stepped outside the airport, the cool air of Toronto hit me, grounding me back in reality. But it wasn't the same reality. I wasn't the same man who had left just a week ago. The trip had done something to me, something deep. I had gained something valuable in that silence, in that solitude. I had gained the ability to see myself clearly. I was no longer defined by my family, by my past, or by my role as a father and provider. I was defined by my own choices now. And yet, as I stood there, my phone buzzed in my pocket. I pulled it out. And there it was. A message from Ethan. Dad, I've been thinking about everything. I know I messed up. I'm sorry. Can we talk? I stared at the message for a long time, my finger hovering over the screen. Part of me wanted to respond immediately, to set things right, to hear what Ethan had to say. But another part of me, the part that had spent the last week reconnecting with myself, knew better. This wasn't just about his apology. It was about me. I had already made up my mind. The distance between us wasn't just emotional. It was something I had to build for myself. Something that came from within. I couldn't just let him back into my life because he said he was sorry. I had to be sure. Sure that this time, it wasn't going to be about what he needed, but about what I needed. And what I needed was to feel whole again. To not have my worth dictated by his actions. I put the phone down and took a deep breath, letting the cool Toronto air fill my lungs. This was my life. My decision. I can feel the tension building. Can't you? Have you ever had to make the decision to put yourself first, even when it meant disappointing someone you love? It's hard, but sometimes the only way forward is to create space for yourself. If you're with me on this, hit that like button, comment, and let's talk about it. Subscribe to stay with me. This journey isn't over yet. There's still so much more to uncover, and I'm so glad you're here for it. The days after returning to Toronto were a mixture of routine and reflection. I started going through the motions again: work, errands, calls with friends, but it felt different this time. I was making decisions for myself, not just reacting to the needs of others. I began to reorganize my home, clearing out the clutter, both physical and emotional. I even started picking up old hobbies again: painting, writing, walking through the city with no destination in mind. It was strange at first, this newfound sense of freedom. I had always been driven by goals, by the next step, by what needed to be done. But now, I wasn't looking for the next thing. I was enjoying the present, taking life as it came, without the weight of everyone else's expectations. Then, one afternoon, as I sat at my desk in the quiet of my study, I received a phone call. It was from Ethan. I stared at the screen for a moment, unsure of what to do. My heart beat a little faster. My mind racing. Should I answer? Should I ignore it? I hesitated. Then I pressed the button to answer. "Hello, Dad?" Ethan's voice was shaky, different than the last time we spoke. "I've been thinking about everything. I know I hurt you. And I'm sorry. I've been an idiot. And I know I can't undo the damage I've done. But I want to make things right. Please." I listened to him for a moment, the sincerity in his voice unmistakable. But I wasn't ready to forgive him yet. Not like this. "I appreciate your apology." "Ethan," I said, my voice steady, "but you need to understand something. This isn't just about you saying sorry. It's about you showing me that you mean it. And right now, I'm not sure you're ready to do that." There was a long pause on the other end of the line. "I get it, Dad," Ethan said quietly. "I'm willing to do whatever it takes." I sighed, feeling the weight of the conversation. "Let's take it one step at a time. We'll talk again soon." I hung up, and as I sat there, I realized something. This wasn't the end. It was just the beginning of a new chapter. A chapter where I could write my own story, where I wasn't defined by my past, but by my future. The days that followed Ethan's call were filled with a strange mix of hope and uncertainty. For the first time in months, I felt like a small seed of something could grow inside me, something I hadn't felt in a long time, the possibility of healing. But as I sat in my study, thinking over our conversation, I realized that healing couldn't come until I learned to let go, and not just of Ethan, but of the weight I had been carrying for so long, the weight of trying to hold my family together when all the pieces had already fallen apart. I had spent my entire life trying to fix things. I had given everything I had to my family, always believing that love was about sacrifice. But now I understood true love, the kind that builds rather than destroys, is about boundaries. It's about giving from a place of strength, not weakness. I remembered the words Rachel had said to me when we spoke a few weeks ago. "Let go. Alex, it's the hardest thing you'll ever do, but it's the only way to move forward." And for the first time, I truly understood what she meant. The next morning, after the call with Ethan, I found myself sitting at the kitchen table, a cup of coffee in my hand. The morning sun filtered in through the windows, casting a soft glow over the room. The house was quiet, still. It was a moment of peace I hadn't experienced in years. I thought about what I wanted my life to look like from here on out. For so long, I had been a caretaker, a provider, a father who always put others before himself. But now, I was asking myself, what about me? It wasn't easy to admit, but I knew that for too long, I had neglected my own needs. I had poured everything I had into my family, believing that if I just kept giving, kept sacrificing, they would see my worth. But now, I realized that I had lost myself in the process. I had always put their happiness first. But now, I had to put mine first. It was time to take back control, to live for myself. I spent the next few weeks doing just that. I reconnected with the parts of me I had long forgotten. The hobbies I had pushed aside, the dreams I had put on hold, the passions I had let slip away, they all came flooding back. I took up painting again. I had always enjoyed it, but had never made the time for it. Now, I found myself spending hours each day in my small studio, the brushes in my hand, the canvas in front of me. For the first time in years, I wasn't just going through the motions I was creating. I started traveling more too, not for anyone else, but for me. I went to places I had always dreamed of visiting but had never made the time for. I spent a week in the mountains, hiking and breathing in the fresh air. I visited museums, explored new cities, and spent time with people who reminded me of what it meant to truly live. And with every step I took, I felt lighter. The weight of the past, the years of trying to make everything work, the sacrifices, the disappointments began to lift. I was no longer defined by the role I had played for others. I was finally defining myself. Despite all the progress I was making, there were still moments of doubt, moments where I questioned whether I had done the right thing. Was I wrong to distance myself from Ethan? Was I too harsh? Too quick to make a decision that would affect both of our lives forever? But as I sat on the porch one evening, watching the sunset, I realized that it wasn't about being right or wrong. It was about peace. It was about protecting myself and my well-being, something I had never done before. I had to protect my peace, even if it meant making tough decisions. I couldn't let Ethan back into my life without real change. And for the first time in a long time, I wasn't waiting for him to come around. I was moving forward on my own terms. And then, one afternoon, my phone rang again. It was Ethan. He hesitated. After everything that had happened, after all the time I had spent learning how to live for myself, I wasn't sure if I was ready to go back. But this time, something was different. I had changed. My mindset had shifted. I had let go of the need to fix things, the need to make everything okay. I picked up the phone. Dad? Ethan's voice was different this time. It was softer, filled with something I hadn't heard before. I've been thinking a lot about everything. I realize I've hurt you. I've been selfish. And I'm sorry for that. I don't expect things to go back to the way they were. But I want to try again. I want to make it right. It took a deep breath, feeling the weight of his words sink in. This was it. The moment I had been waiting for. The moment where Ethan finally understood. But it wasn't about me accepting him back right away. It wasn't about forgiving him immediately. It was about giving him the space to prove he had changed. I'm willing to talk, I said slowly. But understand this. Ethan, I can't just go back to the way things were. You need to show me that you've truly changed. Actions speak louder than words. There was silence on the other end, and I could hear Ethan take a deep breath. I understand, and I'm ready to show you. The days that followed were a series of small steps conversations, apologies, and moments of vulnerability. But I knew that rebuilding our relationship wouldn't be easy. It couldn't be easy, because real change takes time. And as I watched Ethan try, really try to make amends. I realized something important. He wasn't just working to rebuild our relationship, he was also rebuilding himself. I was no longer the person who needed to fix everything. I was no longer the one who carried the weight of our family's issues. I was living my life for me. And if Ethan wanted to be a part of it, he had to meet me where I was. The truth was, I didn't need Ethan to complete me anymore. I had completed myself, and that realization was worth everything. The weeks that followed felt like the slow, steady turning of a page. Each day a new word, each interaction a new sentence in a story I was still writing. Ethan's attempts to reach me, to bridge the gap that had formed between us. Vergenuine. But the healing wasn't instant. It never is. It was going to take time, trust, and, most importantly, consistency. This was no longer about fixing a broken relationship with a quick apology. It was about creating something new, something more authentic than the old patterns we had lived by. When Ethan had called, admitting his mistakes, I felt a mixture of relief and wariness. The years of silence, the hurt, the frustration, it couldn't be erased by words alone. But for the first time in a long while, I felt that perhaps we could rebuild not by going backward, but by forging a new path forward. I couldn't go back to being the father I had once been, the one who made sacrifices without question, who lived for his family and waited for love in return. That version of me was gone, and I had to accept that if this new relationship was going to work, it couldn't be based on the past. Over time, I found myself reflecting more on the lessons I had learned during those months of solitude. The journey I had taken wasn't just about Ethan or about mending our bond. It was about me. It was about learning to stand up for myself, to value myself, and to understand that sometimes the greatest act of love is to set boundaries not just for others, but for yourself. I remember one evening, sitting by the window with a glass of wine in my hand, watching the sunset paint the sky in shades of pink and orange. It had been a while since I had taken a moment to simply be still, to reflect. I had spent so many years filling my life with activity, with the needs of others, that I had forgotten what it meant to be present in my own life. As the light slowly faded and the stars began to appear, I realized something important. I was no longer waiting for the world to change around me. I was changing it myself. And that shift, that internal transformation, was the most liberating feeling I had ever known. It wasn't long before Ethan reached out again. This time, there was no apology, no plea for forgiveness, just a simple message: Dad, I was thinking about you today. I miss you. I hope we can talk soon. I sat with the message for a long time. No demands, no urgency, just a quiet reaching out. I had spent so much of my life feeling like I was the one who had to initiate everything, whether it was reaching out to help, reaching out to give, reaching out to fix things. But this time, it was different. Ethan was reaching out on his own. It felt like a true step forward. From him, and from me. I picked up the phone and called him. Hey, Dad. Ethan's voice was warmer this time, more relaxed. I've been thinking a lot about what you said, and I really want to make things better between us. I know, I said simply, my voice steady. But, Ethan, we're not going to fix everything overnight. It's going to take time. We both need to be patient. I understand, he said, and I'm not expecting it all to be okay right away. I just want to be a part of your life again. I miss you. Dad, the words were simple, but they meant everything. In that moment, I realized something that I had been avoiding. Forgiveness doesn't mean erasing the past. It means accepting it, learning from it, and using it to create a healthier future. We'll take it one step at a time, I said, feeling a sense of resolve. And Ethan, I need you to understand something. This is about both of us. It's not just about me forgiving you. It's about us rebuilding together on new terms. I get it, he said quietly, and I'm ready. A few weeks passed, and I found myself doing something I hadn't done in a long time, taking a real interest in the present. I began to spend more time with friends, rekindling relationships that had been put on hold for far too long. I took weekend trips to places I had always wanted to visit, but never had the time for. I explored the city, rediscovered old passions, and made new memories that weren't defined by my past, by Ethan's mistakes, or by the things that had hurt me. The change in me was palpable. I was no longer the man who spent his days carrying the burdens of others. I was creating a life for myself, a life where I mattered just as much as anyone else. And it wasn't about being selfish, it was about being whole, being enough, just as I was. The biggest shift, however, was in my relationship with Ethan. We began to talk more, not about the past, but about the future. We talked about what we both needed from each other moving forward. It wasn't about finding closure, it was about finding common ground. We didn't have to erase the mistakes we had made, but we could choose to learn from them and use them to shape a better relationship. One afternoon, I invited Ethan to join me for lunch at the small cafe around the corner from my house. It was a casual meeting, no expectations, just the opportunity to spend time together. We sat outside, under the shade of a large oak tree, watching the people go by. I've been thinking, Ethan said, looking at his coffee. I've never really understood how much you gave for us, how much you sacrificed. I always just thought it was your job, but now I see things differently. You don't have to apologize, I said, my voice calm. You've got to understand, Ethan, I did what I thought was right. But it's not just about giving, it's about balance. I gave, but I didn't always give to myself. I'm sorry, he said again, his voice thick with emotion. I know I should have been there more. I should have seen what you were going through. You're here now, I said, and that's what matters. We sat in silence for a moment, the weight of the conversation hanging between us. But this time, it wasn't the weight of anger or betrayal. It was the weight of understanding. We weren't going to fix everything in one afternoon. That was never the goal. But we were beginning to build something that had been broken for so long, and that, in itself, was enough. As the days went by, I began to feel a new sense of peace. Ethan and I were rebuilding our relationship. But this time, it wasn't about repeating the past. It wasn't about me being the father I once was, or Ethan being the son he had been. It was about us creating something new together. I wasn't sure where it would lead, but for the first time in a long time, I wasn't worried about the outcome. I was living in the present, focusing on the here and now, not on what had been lost or what could have been. I had learned to let go, and in doing so, I had found freedom, the freedom to be who I truly was, without the weight of other people's expectations, the freedom to define my own happiness, my own future, and that freedom, that peace, was worth more than anything I had ever known. It had been a few months since Ethan and I started trying to rebuild our relationship. The road hadn't been easy, but it had been steady. We had learned to speak to each other without the weight of past misunderstandings dragging us down. There were still days of doubt, days when I wondered if I had done the right thing. But those moments were becoming fewer and fewer. In the past, I would have spent hours ruminating over every word, every action, questioning my decisions. But now, I felt different. The peace I had found within myself on that trip to the Arctic had stayed with me. I had learned that I couldn't control everything. I couldn't fix everything. And that was okay. What mattered was that I had taken the steps to rebuild my life and my relationship with Ethan on my own terms. The evening was quiet when Ethan texted me asking if we could meet up. It had been a few weeks since our last conversation, and I wondered what this new conversation would hold. He was doing better. I could tell. He had become more open, more accountable for his actions, and I had been trying to show him the same understanding, the same patience he had shown me. But this time, it felt different. I met him at the cafe we had started going to a few months ago, the same cafe where we had first tried to rebuild our connection. I sat at the same table, looking around at the familiar setting, and for the first time, I didn't feel the weight of what had been lost. It wasn't about the past anymore, it was about us. Ethan walked in, and I could see the hesitation in his steps, the nervous energy in the way he looked around. But this time, it wasn't just about him. It was about us both being in a new place. "Hey, Dad," Ethan said, sitting down across from me. His voice was lighter than I had heard in a while, and there was a soft smile on his face. "Hey, Ethan," I replied. "How's it going?" He took a deep breath and looked me in the eye. "I've been thinking a lot about everything lately, about what we've been through. And I realized something important. I can't change the past, but I can learn from it." I felt my heart soften at his words. The journey hadn't been easy, but moments like these made it worth it. I had spent so many years teaching him lessons, but now it seemed like he was teaching me something too. "I'm proud of you." "Ethan," I said quietly, "you're right. You can't change the past, but you can shape the future, and I'm glad we're doing that together." He nodded, his gaze steady. "I've been trying to be more honest with myself. And with you, I know I messed up. And I'm sorry for all the things I took for granted." I didn't respond right away. Instead, I sat there, feeling the weight of his words. It wasn't just about saying sorry anymore. It was about understanding, about mutual growth. I had spent so long waiting for him to understand what he had done. But now I realized that I, too, needed to understand how much I had changed. I had let go of the old expectations, the ones that bound me to the idea that I needed to be everything for everyone. I had learned that I couldn't be everything for anyone, not if I wanted to be happy. "I appreciate you saying that," I said finally. "But, Ethan, the thing is, this isn't just about apologies. It's about learning and growing. We're both learning to rebuild not just the relationship, but also who we are. And that's what matters most." We sat in silence for a while, and for the first time in a long time, it felt peaceful. There was no rush, no expectation. We were simply present with each other. As we continued to talk, I realized how much Ethan had changed in the time since that difficult conversation months ago. He wasn't the same person who had abandoned me at the airport, and I wasn't the same person who had let him. We had both done the hard work of forgiveness, not just for each other, but for ourselves, and that made all the difference. We finished our coffee, and as we stood to leave, Ethan turned to me with a more serious expression on his face. "Dad, I've been thinking, I know I can't make up for everything, but I want to do something for you. I want to make it right." I raised an eyebrow. Curious. "What do you mean?" "I'm going to take you on a trip," he said, a grin spreading across his face. "You've always wanted to go to Italy." "Right. Well, I want to give that to you. I don't know how or when, but I'll make it happen. I stood there for a moment, taken aback by his gesture. It wasn't just about the trip. It was about him recognizing something that I hadn't even realized. I needed the opportunity to do something kind, something meaningful, in return for everything I had given him. You don't have to do that, I said, my voice thick with emotion. But I appreciate it. You've already given me more than I could ask for by showing me you're ready to be there. That's enough. He smiled, and for the first time in what felt like years, I saw the son I had always hoped would return. The one who had taken responsibility for his actions, who was ready to move forward. Not just for me, but for himself. As we left the cafe together, walking side by side, I realized that this wasn't just the beginning of rebuilding our relationship. It was the beginning of something even more important, the freedom to move forward. Together, no longer trapped by the past, but free to embrace the future. In the weeks that followed, Ethan and I continued to rebuild our bond, one small step at a time. We learned to communicate better, to understand each other more, and to appreciate the space we each needed to grow. It wasn't always easy. There were still moments of tension, moments when the past tried to resurface. But we had learned that growth doesn't happen overnight. It's a process, and it requires patience, vulnerability, and commitment. And with each passing day, I found myself thinking less about what I had lost and more about what I had gained, not just in my relationship with Ethan, but in myself. The greatest lesson I learned through all of this was that true freedom comes when we stop holding on to what no longer serves us, whether it's a person, a memory, or an expectation. Letting go doesn't mean giving up. It means embracing the possibility of something new. It means stepping forward with the understanding that we can create the future we want, no matter what's behind us. I didn't know what the future would hold for me, for Ethan, or for anyone else in my life. But I did know one thing. I was ready to face it. I want to leave you with a final thought. Sometimes, the hardest thing we can do is let go of what's holding us back. But in doing so, we open ourselves up to a future full of possibilities. If this journey has resonated with you, share your thoughts in the comments below. What have you let go of? And what freedom have you found as a result? Like, comment, and subscribe to stay with me on this journey. We're just getting started. There's always more to learn, and I can't wait to share it with you.